Welcome. A bit about me. Keep it short. I have been developing software for more than 25 years, closer to 30. I have been involved in and working with .NET since the preview versions of 1.0 came out in the old framework. I work as a lead Microsoft development consultant at Bergler, and I have my own company where I do some coaching and training. And I'm here to help. I love to share my knowledge. So I have a blog, I have 2 YouTube channels, I have a course on Udemy, I do speak at events, I write, I teach. Microsoft awarded me the MVP award, and I'm also a certified trainer. But that's enough about me. I'm not that interesting. What are we going to do? We are going to talk about a bit test-driven development theory, and then we're going to dive into code, more code, and in the end, we will come to a conclusion. Okay. But test-driven development, let's be honest, what we normally do and what you see a lot happening is a focus on vibe coding. And normally what we do is we start out with a user interface, and from that point onwards, we generate all the code, including all the domain logic that we need. Okay, that's can of course work, and of course you can use that approach to even test your domain knowledge. But what if you could make the domain knowledge a first-class citizen, actually the testing of it? Well, I'm a bit worried. Well, how have you? Are there any people in the audience that have already have some experience in test-driven development? I I look at the other screen because I do see the poll there. All votes. Don't see the conclusion yet. Okay.
We can leave it running for a bit. If you do a vote right now, you can see the values. We can leave it running just a little bit longer.
Yeah, that's just fine. It's okay, and I do see that a lot of people in the audience have already done some experimentation with test-driven development, which is fine. I'll dive into the theory a bit anyway, just for the other half, but also for all the people who are watching the recording afterwards. So, test-driven development, testing as a first-class citizen, testing as the first thing to do, because let's be honest, a lot of developers don't like to write unit tests. And if I talk to them about test-driven development, they think, well, okay, Joan just lost his mind and he wants me to write more tests than I am quite willing to do. Well, there are some rules if you want to start working with test-driven development. Well, of course, test is a first-class citizen. You start out with a test. And because there's no code, you will always have a failing test. Then you add some code to the test that you actually have a test. And even then you can write your production code that is to make it enough. You can only write that much code to make the current test pass. Okay. Let's look at a bit of a schematic on that. What does this process look like? So I write a test and I run the test, and that test will fail because either way the test doesn't compile, or simply the code changes that have to be made to the objects haven't been made yet. I create the code, I run my tests again, and hopefully that's where it ends up green. And in the normal test-driven theory, it would end here. But I like my code to be refactored, so I refactor the code. I run my tests again, and if everything's okay, they are still green, and then I can continue writing another test. Okay, and that's what you keep on doing cycle after cycle. Okay. What would be the benefits of using such an approach? Well, I start out with thinking about what do I want to test? What does my code should behave? So if my test is actually completed and passed, I know that the code works as expected. And if I have to write a test, I have to write a test code against the interface of some class that exposes some logic. And if that logic or that interface is quite hard to use, it will be very hard to test. And if I put testing as a first class citizen, I probably will end up with an easier to use interface. And with that, I don't need a user interface, but a C# class interface. Another benefit is that you can refactor your code with confidence. I don't know how about you, but I have been on projects where I entered and I thought, well, okay, this code base really needs some refactoring love, but there were no unit tests in place. And yes, I do know how to refactor, and yes, I do it anyway, but I like to do it with the governance of unit testing so that I know that I didn't break anything. And last but not least, at least on my line, is the hide code coverage. Because I know that are a lot of program managers and product leads who are pushing a development team into high code coverage. But that's easy to do with AI. But what do you achieve? Simply testing getters and setters is very good for your code coverage. Does it really do anything about the risks that your application really has? No. So I really like and have liked test-driven development. And if you look at it, it's not new. I just looked it up just before the session. When was it first introduced as part of extreme programming? By the time that I started writing my first commercial lines of code in 1996. So it's quite an old technology, but still quite valuable at the moment. Okay, I did promise you not a lot of slides, and I'm not going to do that. But we are going to do something for unit testing. We are going to test something. And for that, I always love to have some kind of case where where we can reason about to actually show you what the theory is all about. Well, next to being a developer, I'm also a medical first aid volunteer. And of course, the charity that I work for, we do need some kind of planning. And okay, I started writing a system for that one. It's not completed yet, and I only will show a very small part of the system because I want to explain some theory of it. But if we are looking at the system, I wanted to check, okay, we have some business rules. And I handpicked a few of them simply to be able to give this talk. So, the business rules that are important. When creating an event, I need to have a shift that matches the beginner-end moment. Because an event can last sometimes an entire day, 14, 15 hours, and I don't want a volunteer to be working 14 or 15 hours. So I split up the event in multiple shifts, but on default, an event should have one shift. There are always a number of volunteers needed, and that applies to the event, but that needs to be propagated to a shift because that may vary basis on some circumstances. You can imagine if it's an event where in the evening a lot of alcohol is used, then I probably will need more volunteers than I need during the daytime where everything is quiet. Okay, one other rule, no more volunteers than the requested number can be assigned because I don't push more people to a shift than is needed. Well, it's a medical thing, so a volunteer must have a valid license at the moment of the event or shift. And quite normal, the same volunteer can't be planned at the same moment on different shifts. Because I don't know how about you, but I haven't managed yet to be at the same two different places at the same time. Okay, let's use this as a hook to start working with our code. So I'm going to shut down PowerPoint. I don't like PowerPoint. We are diving into code. And what have I done? I have started out creating an application, at least the bare bones of it, and I'll walk you through it. Okay, I've got my domain, and as you can see, it's laid out a bit according to a layered architecture. So I've got my domain, and in that domain, I've got a person class that actually has some properties. I've got some customer that has an invoice address. I've got a volunteer. Okay, that's a license number and a license expiration date. But my event is just a class. My shift is just a class, and there's no code in there yet. Okay, and of course, I've got my domain tests. Okay, empty. My domain service. Oh, there's a class in it. Doesn't do anything. And if I look at the tests, you will see the shift service tests, which is empty again. There's nothing in infrastructure yet. There's nothing in this project because that's simply a console application that doesn't do anything. Okay, that's what we are going to start out with. Okay, and when I was prepping for this talk, I thought, well, okay, what are we going to do? Well, let's first start doing it the manual way, because if you know how to do it the manual way, you can appreciate the AI approach even more. So what am I going to do? I am going for my event tests. And I don't know how about you, but I'm not a very good typist. So I did put in some live templates to help me at least write the boilerplate part of it. So what we're going to do, we are going to write the first business rule by hand. And looking back, that's this one. When creating an event, the shift must be created. Okay, not that difficult. So let's do that, GR, and I will take this one. And simply, when creating an event, a matching shift must be created. Perfect. Don't know about you, but I really like my AAA pattern, the arrange, act, and assert. And let's use that. Okay. What do I want to do? I want a new event. Perfect. And I want to pass in some begin dates. Okay, let's simply let writer help me. I'm not going for 2000. Want to do it on New Year's Day on the next year, and I'll simply start at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I have an end date. Well, not that I want this one. It's simply the begin date at hours. Well, that would be a very short shift. Let's simply go for 8. And what I'll do is put in the begin and end date and put my assertion in it. Assert equal, what do I want? I want my new event dot start date to match the new event dot shifts dot single dot start date. Okay, and the same goes for, of course, for the end date. Okay, well, I really obeyed the rules of test-driven development. I have created a test that doesn't even compile. So yeah, I can run it, but that won't work. Okay, let's fix this. So we now can write enough code to make the test compile and actually pass. Well, okay. But I don't know about you, but I'm quite lazy as a developer. And I really like Rider. So let's simply let's Rider have this fixed. I have the begin date. I've got the end date. Perfect. And what I want to do is simply say, well, okay, put in a begin date and put in the end date. Perfect. Okay. If I go back to my event tests, that's fixed. I have the start date. Okay, let's see in my event. There's the start date, there's the end date. So that should be fixed. But did I? Okay. We'll fix that. That's the downside of doing things by hand, of course. And I also have the shifts here. Okay, what I'll do is I'll simply put in a get only property. And what I want to do is I want to put in an enumerable of shifts. And of course, for that to work, I will need to have a private. And what will I need? I will need to have a private list of shifts and initialize it directly. Okay. And what I can do is here simply return my shifts. Okay. Okay. Probably should do something here for the shifts with the begin date and end dates. Of course, this is begin date shifts. Oh, sure. Shift doesn't have those properties yet. So let's create this one. Perfect. And do the same exercise again. And create an auto property. Okay. Remove that one because I don't want that. Okay. And simply put it in begin date. Perfect. Okay. With the help of Writer, I did manage to write this in a few minutes. And this probably will run. So let's do that. Let's run it to double check if my unit test runs. Okay. That's not what I want to do, of course. If I've got an AI system, I want the AI system to actually help me. Well, how can it help you? Well, let's dive into our second business rule. An event needs to record the number of volunteers needed, and it should be propagated when the shift is created. Okay. I have got a prototype for that one. So what I want is the number of volunteers to be passed to the shift. Okay, do the same thing a bit. I can, of course, say, well, okay, you know what? The generation part of what I just did, I'll leave that up to AI. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to copy over this. Perfect. What I'm going to do is I am going to specify a number of volunteers. Well, leave it to 5. Fine by me. And I'm going to create a new event, and that will have that number of volunteers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to assert the value for new events, a number of volunteers, and I don't want to double check that one. What I want to do is just as the other one, I want the single number of volunteers to be checked. Okay. Perfect. Let's start with simply asking AI what we can do about it. Okay. I've got my fact. Okay. One thing that I simply will throw away because I want to show you it individually. If you want AI assistant to start helping you, it's good to give it some guidelines. And of course, you can enter those in the prompt every time that you have it, but you don't have to. What I did is I created an instructions file. And in that instructions file, just double check. Oh. What's in the instructions file? I'm a senior developer in C#. I like to use the latest features. I like clean coding. I do want my code to be compliant with the don't repeat yourself and the single responsibility. And I want to comply to the Yagni principle. You ain't gonna need it. And quite important, I want to ask for confirmation of the plan. Okay. That's what I want to be passed into every prompt that I do. So what I'm going to do, that's it. That's all I have. Okay. What I will do is generate the unit test code and other code for me. Let's see what happens. This is the tricky part, of course. Now I actually am relying on AI doing things during a live session. So if things break down, we'll manage to fix it together. I'm quite sure of it. Okay, let's see what it's doing. It's already pushing an analysis. And what's good, that because I use the instructions, it's going to give me a proposed change. What's the thing? One of the things that I want to achieve in test-driven development is I want to have a clean interface of the subject under test. So let's double check if that is the case. What is the proposed change? Oh, number of volunteers should be added to shift. Okay, perfect with that. A constructor overload. Okay, perfect with that. In event, the same. And a constructor overload. Okay, and shift creation. Well, I don't know how about you, but I don't like constructor overloads. So what I'm going to do is just use one constructor, do not overload. Okay. Let's see what the new plan will be. Okay. I have an updated constructor. Okay, it pushes in now a default value. Not too fond of it, but okay. And well, you know what? I am going to accept the plan. And just wait. Okay. It's patching. Let's see what got changed. Event shift, and that's it. So if we look at the changes, there's my number of volunteers. There's it being pushed in my constructor. Perfect. And the same goes for event. Okay, I'm going to accept the changes. And of course, I'm a test-driven developer. I now have code. So I always run my tests and they pass. Perfect. Okay, so this does help already, but still a lot of work. And some smart people sometimes told me that AI is smart as well. Okay, let's simply look at it. What I want is no more volunteers than the requested number can be assigned to a shift. Okay, perfect. Let's see what that can do. So what I want to do is I don't want to be overassigned, right? Okay, so what I could do is simply say, okay, this is my new selection, and I could give it a try that AI assistant could generate all the code for me. That could be. But before I do that, I do want it to have a bit of help because I want it to play nicely with the test-driven development rules. So I created a test rule. And what this simply says is, well, when you implement the code for a unit test, you can only implement the code to make it compile and the unit test to pass. So don't come up with other code. Don't add properties to classes unless instructed so, because GenAI does have the tendency sometimes to simply add different properties to classes. You can only verify a single aspect. I didn't specify that in the theory, but if you want your unit tests to have real value, you should limit the aspects that you test per unit test. In my typical unit tests, I only test one single aspect. And that could be that for certain behavior, that I have got 5 or 6 different unit tests, all testing different aspects. Okay, you are not, if you need dependent classes, you use a DI approach, because I want it to be injectable, and I want you to use MOQ for mocking interfaces. Okay. What you normally do if you create a rule like this, you are not going to put it on manual. You are going to put it on always. You are going to do it on model decision or even file patterns. But just for this demo, I put it on manual because I want to actually add it to the prompt explicitly. Okay. Close this down because I have my AI assistant and I still have my selection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my instructions file to it. I am going to add my rules to it. And what I'm going to do is say implement the unit test and needed code. Okay. Let's see what will happen. And now it's simply thinking, do make sure if you are working in it that you always use the quick edit mode. Do not use just the guest mode. Okay, what's my plan? We are going to create a volunteer class to represent volunteers. Okay, add a collection to track assigned volunteers, assign volunteer method to the shift, and complete the unit test. Well, does this look okay to me? It might, but I think that I already have a volunteer. So what I want to do is use volunteer because I don't want the AI to generate a new class for me. Okay. Let's see what happens. Is this what I'm looking for? Collection to track, assign volunteers. I'm fine with that. A property. Well, this looks fine. Let's simply do this because we can always keep iterating on the code that got generated. Just waiting. Hopefully it will give me an answer pretty soon. Okay, the complete. So it's going to patch my shift. And it's still running. Domain tests gets updated. Okay, perfect. We are doing test-driven development, right? So tests are a first-class citizen. I don't want to look at the generated code yet. I want to look at my test. So what did AI Assistant come up with? The begin date, the end date, the number of volunteers. I've got a new event. And let's get AI a bit out of the way. And I've got a shift, and I will assign 2 volunteers to the shift. And it will throw an invalid operation exception. Okay. Don't want this. I use a domain exception. That's enough. Okay. I didn't specify it. And AI Assistant simply assumed that I was happy with an invalid operation exception. And I'm not, because I am looking at how does my class behave. So let's simply wait for it to work. Okay. Let's see. I've got my domain exception added in the shifts. I've got my domain exception, and in the test, it will double check. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to accept all. Yes, I want to add the new classes. Okay, so what it actually did, which is quite surprising to me, is that it already generated an under limit. And I will tell you why that happened, probably. Because that's what I'm going to show you next. And the history in the context, it probably kept in rider. So, but that's fine. Because test-driven development involves a lot of writing unit tests. And that can be quite mundane. And if you look at test-driven development and if you look at testing theory, you should always test the happy path and the unhappy path and boundary cases and all kinds of stuff. And that's sometimes quite mundane to do. And fortunately, we have something that can help us with mundane things. And of course, that's simply an AI. So what I'm going to do is I am going to add a new rule to my rules that will say always generate a success test case as well. Because in this presentation, I use the negative cases. You could write this as well if you want a positive case, of course, but it's fine. I simply force it now to write a success case. Simply save it. Okay, perfect. Let's look at our rules. And we're doing quite good on time, which is perfect. A volunteer must have a valid license at the moment of the event or shift. Okay. Perfect. Let's look at it. What I did, actually this one, I really would love to move that to shifts. Not going to do that because I simply injected the code in the wrong place. But this is actually a shift test. The new business rule that we have to implement has got everything to do with a shift. Because you don't assign volunteers to an event, you assign them to a shift. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to my shift tests. And in there, I am going to say, well, you know what? I don't want a volunteer without a license. Okay. Just remember, I updated my rules. So I'm going to add my instructions. I am going to add my rules. And now I'm going to ask implement unit test and code. There's nothing specific. Oh, perhaps put in the selection that it knows what to do, and it didn't put effect on top of it. Okay, let's do that. Okay, let's simply run it. Let's see what happens. Because if everything works out nicely, I should get an implementation for this one. And I should get an implementation for a volunteer with a non-expired license. Okay. It's doing its thing. Perfect. Well, let's see. What did it do? Oh, I didn't include the instructions. Perfect. That's why it's already done some things. Okay, let's see what happens. Patches. What is my shift? Tests. I've got a shift begin. I simply created a shift. I added a volunteer with an expired license at the moment of the shift. And you will expect a domain exception. And here it is. I do have a volunteer with a valid license. So this will save me a lot of time simply generating new test cases step by step. And when you first start practicing test-driven development, it's very good that you write out the test cases one by one. But once you have got some experience, it's just fine to have AI help you with it. So, fine with this one. I accept all. Okay. Actually, we did do quite a lot in this application already in just limited time. Okay. Let's look. My PowerPoint. This is a more tricky one. the same volunteer can't be planned at the same moment on different shifts, because that would mean that I need volunteer information, that I do need information from different shifts. Okay, seems to be a challenge. But this also seems to be a challenge that this functionality should not be present in either the event or the shift. Okay, so where are we going to put it? We are going to put it in the domain service. Okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to my domain service tests, of course. And I don't know if you recall, but domain service was simply empty. Okay, let's see. GI, what do I want to do? I want it for double assignment. Perfect. What I did is I wrote not only the method, but also gave some hints already about the code that needed to be generated, because I want to have a shift repository. I want it to inject in the shift service. I want that shift service to be in the domain service class library. I want it to mock, and I want to assign the volunteer. Just in plain English, nothing specific. So if I look at the theory of test-driven development, I still apply to it because I simply spec'd out the test that I want. Okay. What we're going to do? We spent the last half hour just in AI Assistant. But I'm so happy. There's a new AI agent ready in Rider, Junie. And I really love Junie because she can do a lot. Okay, what I'm going to do, you already see, because this was remembered from a last session, I already added the test-driven development rules. Okay, I put Junie into code. I wanted to generate code over the entire solution. And you can specify this. By default, this is not checked, but I did ask it to take a bit more time to reason a bit better about my code. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this one. And what I'm going to do is simply going to say, okay, I want you to implement the unit test and needed code. Let's see what will happen. Let's hope that this works, because otherwise I will revert to a recording that I made in the weekend, just because AI systems can behave quite unpredictable. So let's see what it will do. Attach TDD rules. So it does take in my rules file, getting the structure, searching. It's doing a lot of work. Opening. Okay. Just wait for it. See what happens. Update on task progress. Searching person. Structure. Okay, but I think that you're not really looking for the person, but you are probably looking for the volunteer. But just double checking if it will find it. Update task progress. Okay, it's going to create my shift repository that I requested in the code. Shift service tests. Okay. Just wait for it. Okay, it's editing. Okay, my service tests. And you will see that it's taken in the rules. So that's already also generating the positive test case. So I'm allowing it to run the full solution. Double check if everything works. Okay. it did break some tests. So I'm quite curious what the AI broke and if it can fix it. The license validity rule. Perfect, because I didn't run all the tests. Okay, run the tests again. It's always challenging to see what happens. Sending the request. Okay, run the test again. And this seems to be working quite nicely because I get all my test cases green. Perfect. But I think this is great. But I steered Uni quite a bit in what it needed to do. Okay, let's see if we can do that. I already wrapped it, and we do have some time for it, which is nice. Because what I did, I created another business case where we actually will say that when we add a volunteer, that he or she can't work with more than 12 hours in that month. Okay, that's all I'm going to specify. I'm not going to lay out all the ground rules that I have done before. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to say, well, you know what? These are your happy rules. And I want you to implement the unit test and code. Okay, let's see what she can do. And I don't know about you. Somehow, based on the name Junie, I think more of her like a female. But of course, it's simply a system. It doesn't have any gender, but it's good because she does help me a lot during my daytime job as well. Just let's see if it works. This is really challenging because I did only write this a few hours before the session, which is the thing that I normally never do. But then again, a good challenge is always a nice thing. So let's simply wait what Junie will come up with. Because there's already a plan here, and you can see the plan, the unit test, the non-overlapping shifts, and companion success test that should be created. It will run all the tests, and it will finalize and submit the summary. Okay. Still working. Just give it a few minutes, and otherwise we will leave it to what it is. Okay, there she's coming. Okay, so run. Yes, I do want to run it. Working. They all passed. Perfect. Okay, we are test-driven developers, so we are going to check, does it comply a bit to the interface that we are looking for? So I am going to assign a volunteer to a shift, and there's apparently a check get shifts for volunteer, and that's first, and it will assign a volunteer. Not quite sure if this will work. Quite curious on what shift service got changed into. Let's simply look it up, because that would mean that Get shifts. Okay. Could be. I've seen other implementations where Juni chose to get the shifts for a certain time frame, which is good as well. But I'm happy with it. I simply accept what she did, and I have got running tests. Just to be sure, I've got them all running. Okay. Let's go back. In a limited amount of time, I have created the code with a lot of business rules. And what I normally see a lot when I am working with all kinds of vibe coders, they only focus on the user interface part and they try to validate everything from the user interface. But if you look at test theory, it's going to be quite difficult to test all kinds of business rules through a user interface. So doing it bottom up works as well. So I want to come a bit to a conclusion. Test-driven development is still very useful. And I hope to have shown you in the last 15 minutes that AI can help you write the tests and write the code needed for the tests. Yes, you still need to think about it, but it can definitely help you. The rules that I showed you can be used to steer the code generation. And I did put in the slide can. I think that if you really want to steer the code generation, you should use rules so that you don't have to reapply all kinds of prompts over and over again. Agents like Juni are there for more complex tests. And the integration in Juni in Rider at the moment is still not, compared with the AI assistant, not 100%. I heard from the team that integration will be better in the future, which I really like because I didn't show you, but the instructions file in Juni is not shared with AI assistant at the moment. So you do need to set it up separately. And I would say it's definitely worth investing time, even if you don't know how to practice test-driven development yet, because the combination of using test-driven development approaches with GenAI will definitely help you writing better prompts. And especially if you combine that with a good naming convention for your unit test, that you do give it a good hint on what the status is, what the action should be, and what the expected results should be, then you can write very good domain code that's fully tested in a limited amount of time. And yes, if you have that code in place, you can always think, well, you know what? I'm going to vibe code that user interface on top of it. Fine by me, because if I look at where do a lot of applications fail, it's in complying to the business rules, not in having a very good user interface. So that would be my conclusion. That would also be my call to action for you. Simply, if you haven't practiced test-driven development yet, simply give it a try. If you have, do give it a try in combination with AI, because I hope to have shown you that the combination works. Okay, let's see if there are any questions from the audience.
Hi, Johan. That was a fantastic session there. I'm pleasantly surprised by how well the AI can deal with all of those prompts and questions there.
Yeah, I'm quite surprised, because when I was submitting this talk, I thought, well, okay, I'm not quite sure what it will be. But when I was actually writing all the things, I was really pleasantly surprised in how well the entire process is supported.
Mm-hmm. It kind of feels like it would be the wrong way around almost. You wouldn't kind of expect the AI to be doing test-driven development. You expect them to actually build the thing. You're kind of expecting them to build the thing rather than building the test and then an implementation for it.
Yeah, and that's of course what you also and almost always see in all kinds of presentations about Gen AI. They generate a lot of code and then they say, well, okay, you know what? A great thing. Our AI can generate tests for you. Yes, but what will that test test? The behavior that it observes in the generated code. But is that generated code really the situation that the business is looking for? So I am quite happy that you can use AI both ways, because let's be honest, I'm primarily a backend developer. I love if AI assistants can help me with generating a lot of UI stuff. Um, and I'm quite happy that they can help me with writing the domain stuff, but that does take a bit of more thinking from my side.
Shall we take a look at the chat? I think that we have a couple of good questions there.
Sure.
If I may bring up the first one. It's cool that the AI builds a rich domain model as opposed to an anemic domain model. Does it have to be prompted to do that?
Just didn't fully understood your question. Let's double check if I can. Rich domain model, anemic domain model. Well, if you really want to have, of course, to behave it like an anemic model, if you want special things, always prompt it, always add it into your prompts. Because you don't, if you look at how AIs are trained, they are trained, of course, on current code bases. And they will see a lot of domain classes, the way they really nothing more than simply data collections. Because let's be honest, we've had object orientation for, well, how long? More than 30 years now.
Since the last
but
century.
yeah, it's definitely last century. But if I look at the implementation in most systems, it's simply a domain with a lot of outer prop fields, and that's it.
So do you find then that it generates good code kind of almost by default? You know, the rules look very important there, and I really like the idea of being able to add extra context, extra rules to guide in the right direction. But do you find that those rules don't have to be too heavy?
Um, well, I don't think that if you look at the rules that I use, they're not that heavy. I could have specified it with about half a page or even more. I simply gave it a few hints because I know that Gen AI sometimes has the tendency to start redoing things a bit too enthusiastic, and which I really don't want. But I would say experiment with it. And if you start using it and start adding rules to the rules file, if you think, well, okay, I now encounter a case where I'm not quite happy with the code that is generated, simply add a rule and do the thing again. Because that's, of course, the nice part of it. It's simply software. So you can always revert it, update the rule, do the same thing again, and check, will this work? And the fortunate thing is, because it's simply a markdown file, you can share it with your teammates. So if you come up with a great prompt, a rule file that will really work for you, please share it. Please share it with the outside world as well. We are all here to learn.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good one. I was just going to ask a quick follow up there, and my mind's just gone blank. I've just lost it. It was
Speaking of experimentation, have you tried different models to see if they give different results? I'm sorry to take over from Matt. I just
Works for me.
I jumped in.
No, that's fine. I sometimes do, and not for this presentation because I didn't want to switch between different models. And it's always difficult as well because new models appear quite often, and sometimes you simply stick to a model until you hear from other people, well, okay, I've got great results from that one. So from time to time, I simply start playing around with new models and see what they can do. But it really depends a bit on the complexity, of course, as well for the application that I have to write, because a lot of code, let's be honest, a lot of applications, especially business applications, are not that difficult, and you don't need the super most modern model to help you with the coding. The current models will do just fine. And if you really have something special, okay, then start looking at different models, and once in a while start looking at different models. But please do not have it your daytime job almost to investigate all the different models that are available for you and simply say, well, okay, it will generate. Hey, this is an AI. If I give the same prompt 10 times, I will get probably 10 different answers. So if you want to do real research on it, on what it will do for code generation, it will be great, but it will also be quite a difficult research to put right, because that you simply can take away the normal differentiation that the AI models will generate anyway.
Yeah, I know that it's kind of like an industry-wide problem, sort of evaluating the results and knowing that, if you're using Gen AI in your products and you want to test the output of that, it can be very, very difficult. But I guess a similar question, to models is, you're using both Junie and AI Assistant. Then, when would you kind of use one between the other?
Well, if you look at it for the simple things, if I simply have to update a few code files, AI Assistant will do just fine. If I am wanting it to change code over multiple class libraries and think a bit harder on the entire solution, like I showed you in the last two test sessions, well, then an agent like Junie really shines, because otherwise I have to split it up a bit too much for AI Assistant to really produce the output that I am really looking for.
And I guess if you're doing, so I get that really, that the Junie is kind of built for more sort of thorough problems and solving bigger things, and you got the quick edit mode is a good name for it, really, because you are making quick edits most of the time. Do you still tend to aim for doing a single test at a time, or would you broaden that?
Um, well, I probably would broaden it the way that I showed. So simply, you have got your positive test, you got your negative test, because then you are really looking at the same interface and running tests against that. If I simply give it a class, an entire class, and say, well, generate unit tests for it, then I will probably lose the oversight, because what I want is not to have tests. What I want to have is a very good interface to program against. And that will mean that I will have to validate the plans that are generated over and over again. Am I really happy with the proposal that is here? And if I'm not, I can steer it. And if I do that for a too broad range of unit tests, I probably will lose oversight. And that's a downside of what I see happening a lot when people are using AI for coding. Once they start losing oversight, they simply say, well, okay, accept, I will believe what the AI generated for me, and simply, let's pray for it and hope that it compiles and that all the tests will run. I'm a bit of a control freak. And if it comes to my domain logic, I really want to be in control. And perhaps that's because of my age. I'm not quite sure, but I really do like to be in control, because let's be honest, a lot of us are working in DevOps teams as well. And they do have the emergency pager if something goes wrong. I really like my nights. So I really like to thoroughly test my business code, so that I know that once I get the pager, that it won't ring at 3 a.m. in the morning, that I have to get up and fix a small bug where a smaller than sign should have been a smaller and equal sign.
Yeah, that's an approach I can fully get behind. We have a wonderful question from the chat. It's almost philosophical. I'll read it out loud. I wonder if using AI reduced amount of time a person can be working per day because it requires much more thinking and much more often. And typing becomes a small part of a job. So do you think that AI has reduced the number of working hours for folks?
Mm, I think it's a very good question. And I really like the question because I think if you look at it from a management perspective, a lot of managers probably will say, okay, my developers can do more in less time. But the mental part of it, really knowing what the AI is proposing and thinking about it, that will wear you out at least faster than it will that I simply have to write my code and have writer complete some code for me. I can get into the flow. It's a good one. And I don't think there's a lot of research being done on that aspect. What will it do for a developer? And especially if you really want a developer to start thinking about the code that is proposed and not simply saying, well, okay, I'm a vibe coder. You know what? I am enter a prompt, enter. Oh, there's some code. Okay, enter, fine it, next one. Then you won't get tired. But if you really are looking critically at the prompts and the plans that are generated and that code that gets generated, I must say it's a good one because, yeah, I do notice if I am using a lot of AI during the daytime that I do need more micro breaks simply to ease my mind.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that could be a good one. It's a very good question. I'm quite
Mhm.
curious on doing some more research on it. It's not that we can do it right now, but I'm quite curious. I always like the more ethical part and the more challenging, the positive critical part of AI. And I really, this is a good one. Thanks for the question. It really inspires me to dig in deeper.
Yeah, it's a
Awesome.
fascinating topic, and it's interesting to know whether taking away some of the, I guess, boilerplate and the legwork of typing and of working like that just means that you end up thinking more. And if you're specifying things more, is that going to lead to better code in at the endpoint?
I hope so. If you
Yeah.
really start thinking about it and don't write a unit test simply okay, but be quite specific because the more specific you are, it's almost like prompting. The more specific you are, the better code you get.
Yeah.
And part of the prompting, of course, yes, you can spec it in the prompt, or you can use a very good naming convention for your unit tests so that you can specify the intent on that part.
Yeah, and I was going to ask another question now. Is actually, I wanted to pick up on the thing which my mind completely blanked on, and you mentioned the word oversight. Now that reminded me. You in your prompts, you towards the start, you were asking it, so don't generate any code and tell me what you want to do. Is that something you do day to day, or is that just kind of was that part of the presentation instead?
It is part of the
Mhm.
presentation, but I must say I use it as well in all kinds of instructions files for if I have code gens. Because GenAI does, and especially if you go in agent mode, it will see the entire code base and it will start reasoning about it and it will think, well, okay, I might change that one. Yeah, but I don't want you to change that one yet.
Mhm. Yeah. So it's
So
good to check first.
yeah, it's good to check first, and that's also a thing that I put in based on a experience that I have. If I simply slow it down a bit, it's easier for me. If I
Mhm.
simply let it do its thing and be as enthusiastic as it can be, then I might have to say, well, okay, very nice, but now you came up with a thing that I'm not quite happy with.
Yeah. Okay. So, I guess one last question then is: would you apply this technique to every part of an application, or would you
Oh,
kind of pick and
definitely not.
choose?
No.
Okay.
Where would you apply this? Where does test-driven development really shine? In your business logic. If you have business logic, there it will shine. Do not try to do this if you have, for instance, I do a lot of work in .NET MAUI, for instance. If I have a view model that I want to spec out, I'm a test-driven developer. I'm not going to do that test-driven. I'll simply make up my XAML. I hook up it to the view model, and yes, that view model will start using services and all that stuff. And those services, they have been built test driven, but the user interface, please spare yourself the effort and don't do it.
Right. Very good. I'd like to thank you very much for your time, and a very interesting topic there. I like the idea of being able to use TDD with GenAI, and also as a great way of getting into doing TDD as well.
Definitely, it will help you. And it was
Yes.
great giving this talk. Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. So just like to say thank you, and we'll see you again soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.